Yep, my Auburn Tigers are winning 7-4. It's the top of the ninth. Auburn's the visiting team, so hopefully they'll wrap this up and win the first game of the Super Regional. They have a 3-game Super Regional going, and my apologies, I'm trying to rotate it, but it says rotation is blocked. So you got to see me like this on the phone. So yeah, there you guys go. All right, I'm going to get on the iPad here and tell people that I'm going live, that I'm live now. So hold on one second. And all right, just hold on. And I'm going to share it on to Chris's Telegram group as well as Ronaldo's Telegram group. And I'll go streaming at the moment. All right, okay, let's get into this. We had some news. Unfortunately, in Mississippi and Meridian, a few days ago, there was this guy who was a former Newton, Mississippi police officer. Hadn't been a police officer for a while. But he went to the home of his pregnant fiance, and he shot and killed her. And it looked like it was a domestic disturbance dispute before he shot and killed her. So, Meridian police officer, Officer Kenneth Kroom, this was in Meridian, Mississippi, where it happened. And he responds to the shooting. Kenneth Kroom does. Well, Kenneth Kroom responds to the shooting. I mean, not to the shooting, but he responds to the domestic disturbance. Well, the former Newton, Mississippi police officer shoots and kills Kenneth Kroom, and he shoots and kills his pregnant fiance. So now he recently got arrested. He got arrested in Ackerman, Mississippi, which is about 80 miles north of Meridian, Mississippi, where the incident happened. Well, the authorities have apprehended him in Ackerman, and then he's sent back to Meridian awaiting trial. So that's what the shooter of Kenneth Kroom is having to deal with. Now, Kenneth Kroom, all he wanted to do ever be was a cop. He actually is from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That's the home of the University of Alabama, the rival to my alma mater, Auburn University. And Kenneth Kroom interned with the Tuscaloosa Police Department when he was in university. But he ultimately got hired by the Meridian Police Department in Meridian, Mississippi. And it was his scheduled day off, but he still chose to come to work that day. And he responded to the domestic disturbance, and the suspect shot Kenneth Kroom, and then the suspect also shot his pregnant fiance as well. And my apologies as well. Rotation is blocked on my device at the moment. But yeah, that is what's going on at the moment. I mean, that is what's going on. That is news from my home state of Mississippi. Not the town that I live in, but it had happened in Meridian, Mississippi. Now, I understand in South Africa, crime is much worse than in the United States, and the crime statistics had just been released. And murders in South Africa, at least for the first quarter of 2022, the murders are up 22%. South Africa now averages 68 murders a day. The attempted murders are up 25%. So South Africa averages 68 murders a day. And then the attempted murders are up. Assault crimes are up 25%. And that is just a sad situation. Now, some news from my second home of South Korea. Recently, there had been a fire in Daegu, South Korea, which is tragic. There was this man who was believed to start the fire. It was a lawyer's office, but this lawyer's office was in a big building. And he went to this lawyer's office and started the fire. He died in the fire. Now, we don't know if he accidentally killed himself or he intentionally killed himself. He had a history of mental illness. That's what we know about him. But he goes into this lawyer's office, and he sets the office to ablaze, kills 7 people, but then another nearly 50 people were injured. 48 people were injured. Well, the 48 people that were injured, 31 of those injured people had required hospitalization. That we do know. 31 of those people had required hospitalization. 31 of those 48 injured, and they had to go to the hospital to get treated. Now, and that's a problem. Now, South Korea and the United States recently met with forces in Japan and Singapore, and they signed several agreements with the forces in Japan and Singapore to counter North Korea and China's aggression. And I believe many African countries need to do the same thing. The recent elect president of South Korea, Yoon Suk Yeol, one of his campaign promises was to try to crack down on Chinese aggression throughout the Asian region, to maintain a strong trade relationship with them, but to make sure that South Korea was not being taken advantage of in that trade relationship as well. And you have to prop Yoon Suk Yeol for doing this. Actually, there were two candidates, and there was Lee Jae-myung and Yoon Suk Yeol, and I was hoping that Yoon Suk Yeol would be elected president because he outlined a more aggressive approach. Actually, just like the White House is a presidential house in the United States, the Blue House was in South Korea, but he moved away from the Blue House and is just operating in an office building in downtown Seoul, and the Blue House is open now as a tourist attraction for South Koreans and then a few foreigners as well. Yoon Suk Yeol also has pledged and he's hoping he's going to get this started during his term, that he's eventually going to move the South Korea's capital from Seoul to Sejong. And there's a number of reasons. Sejong is a fairly new city that started in South Korea, but Sejong is out of range of many of North Korea's artillery and chemical weapons. And that is a huge reason why Sejong's being relocated as the capital for South Korea, or that they're wanting to do that. Also, 1/5 of South Korea's population lives in in the city of Seoul, or in its metro areas. So they're trying to ease the burden of that. They're hoping to make Sejong the political capital of Seoul, and then maybe not necessarily make them the financial capital, but have it where they share the financial capital with Seoul a little bit. So I don't think this is going to affect Seoul too bad. I think this is going to make South Korea safer because it's going to keep the capital city away from North Korea's artillery, so North Korea will not be able to hold South Korea hostage in a lot of negotiations. And Seoul still has plenty of tourist attractions, and it's the home of a lot of K-pop, that I don't think it's going to affect Seoul too bad. But some people may think differently, but I don't think this is going to negatively impact Seoul all that bad if the capital city gets moved from Seoul to Sejong. When Park Chung-hee was president of South Korea in the 1960s, he actually wanted to move the capital city from Seoul to Daejeon for similar reasons that I just discussed. Now, talk about going back to South Africa. Recently, I checked on the ENCA's website, and there is a fire that has just broken out in an informal settlement in Johannesburg, and one person has died that we know of, and then one person has been severely injured. So please keep the city of Johannesburg, South Africa, in your thoughts and prayers. Now, as I talked about in the previous live stream, the ENCA as well as the SABC are not becoming pains to watch as much anymore, because with all the infighting that is happening in the ANC, the news networks are being very careful to not pick a side between the Cyril Ramaphosa faction and the Jacob Zuma faction. Now, I don't know how many of you guys have saw Top Gun Maverick. I saw Top Gun Maverick. I thought it was an awesome movie. But if you guys notice, in the first Top Gun, Maverick had a jacket that had the Taiwanese flag and the Japanese flag. Well, the Chinese government launched a protest on this and didn't want Maverick to wear the jacket in that film. And the people who made that movie were going to listen to China at first, and they weren't going to allow that jacket. But there was such an uproar amongst fans elsewhere that in other countries, particularly the US, but also the UK, Japan, Taiwan, obviously, Australia, there were that they had, that they allowed the jacket to be in the movie. And rightfully so. They stood up to all that wokeness crap, and it paid off. And yes, it's a really, really good movie. I highly recommend that you go see Top Gun Maverick if you have not seen it. And yeah, I firmly believe that you will enjoy it. Now, with the Ukraine war, here's what's going on there. Ukraine needs ammunition, and Ukraine has halted Russia's aggression pretty well. Just within the first 100 days of the war, or we're now past 100 days, Russia has only taken 20% of Ukraine. Subway services have resumed in Kiev and Kharkiv, Ukraine. Ukraine says they need more ammunition. They're becoming depleted of ammunition, but Russia still hasn't made more territory gain. That if the West gives them more ammunition than the West has already given them, according to President Zelensky, Ukraine will defeat Russia and defeat them fairly easily. And Newsmax reported this as well. Russia has still not taken control of all the Donbass region. Ukraine still has to take, it still has some control of Severodonetsk and in the Donbass region. Now, it's predicted that Russia's eventually going to take control of that area. And once Russia does, they'll have control pretty much all the Donbass region. But here's the thing. Russia in 2014 said they were just looking at the Donbass region and the disputed regions where most people want to belong to Russia. And most of the average people in the West were okay with that in 2014. Where they turned where they turned against Russia and turned against Russia's objectives and believed Putin was lying was when it was a rigged election that he staged, where 100% of the people who voted in those elections voted to go to Russia. And it was in the 90 percentiles of people in the Donbass region that wanted to belong to Russia, but it wasn't 100%, and anyone with half a brain knew that those elections had been staged. The U.S. condemned the elections, the European Union condemned the elections, and believed those elections were rigged. And then, well, Putin said he wasn't going to invade Ukraine. Well, it turns out that he did invade Ukraine. We saw that, and he's within 100 days to his invasion. Now, there is a lot of grain that's being held hostage. Many African nations import their grain from Ukraine. Well, Russia wants a piece of the pie. They want the money for the grain shipments. They're blaming Ukraine, saying Ukraine mined the Black Sea so they can't get these shipments out. Well, those are Ukrainian shipments, so Russia shouldn't be taking a profit of that. That's gangsterism. Now, a lot of these countries are saying our people are starving. We need the grain. We don't care where it's from. Well, that's Ukraine's grain shipments. And I believe Ukraine would demine the Black Sea if Russia would let Ukraine take the profits on those. Also, there's a city called Kherson, Ukraine, that Russia did conquer. Well, Russia has already issued Russian passports to the people in that city, whether if the people wanted it or not. And that's the latest news break. Now, President Biden of the United States has gone worldwide to try to build up a coalition against Russia, and he's had some difficulties with that. He met with Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, and Bolsonaro said he had to manage his country first. Brazil has a strong trade relationship with Russia, and Brazil did not want to give that up. Taiwan is still buying Russian oil. India is still buying Russian oil, so Russia is still getting hard currency from a lot of other countries. Well, yeah, basically that's what has transpired. But he did get New Zealand to come on board with the coalition, Japan, South Korea. But one of the ones, Israel needs to sell Ukraine their Iron Dome, but they have not done that. Now, I understand, where Israel's coming from is they don't want anybody because they believe Russia's eventually going to overrun Ukraine, they think that once that happens, that Russia will sell the Iron Dome technology to certain terrorist groups. But I believe in the name of freedom that if Israel sells Ukraine the Iron Dome, the way Ukraine is held off against Russia, I think that'll help Ukraine win the war and block a lot of key Russian missiles. So I think Israel is being timid in this, and they need to sell Ukraine the Iron Dome, and they don't need to be scared to try to take more of Ukraine's side than they are. Now, with that being said, I do respect the nation of Israel. Israel allows more freedom and democracy than any other nation in the Middle East. And if you are a South African, and this happened to some South African Jews running a pro-Israel newspaper, and South African students, if they criticize the BDS, which is a Boycott Israel movement, if they criticize the BDS or don't support the BDS, newspapers can get shut down, students can lose scholarships, professors will give students failing grades. The current ANC government is very, very anti-Israel, and the EFF is even more anti-Israel. Now, Israel allows Israeli Arabs to serve in their Knesset, which is their parliament. Israel allows people to legally be homosexuals, which in most other Middle Eastern countries, you will go to the top of a skyscraper and be thrown off the skyscraper if you are an avowed homosexual. So people need to understand that, I mean, Israel makes mistakes, and Israel does some things I don't agree with. Obviously, I think they should sell Ukraine the Iron Dome, but Israel represents freedom and democracy in a tumultuous region. Plain and simple. I mean, plain and simple, Israel does. And we need to remember that. We do. We need to remember that. So, God bless Israel. Okay, recent news on Disney. Peter Rice has been ousted as Disney's, not their CEO, but like their man that was in charge of Disney's TV productions and entertainment productions. He was largely predicted to be Bob Chapek, the CEO of Disney's successor. He was predicted to be Bob Chapek's successor, but Peter Rice actually called the Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, which is not a Don't Say Gay bill. It just prohibits sexual education in kindergarten through third grade. Well, he called that bill a crime against humanity. Not opposing the bill, he called the bill in and of itself that, like it was a violation of human rights, is what he called that bill. Not a crime against humanity, but he thought it was a violation of basic human rights. Peter Rice was largely in charge of bringing a lot of that woke stuff from Disney to the TV and mainstay. And he actually has not been a fit in Fox's, he was a good fit in Fox's live and let live culture. But right after Disney purchased Fox, he went from Fox to Disney. So did Dana Walden. And Dana Walden is still on at Disney, though, and she's taking over his duties. But he hasn't fit in with Disney's button-up culture. So hopefully Disney will get back to making family films and not being as woke. They ousted Peter Rice, which I believe was a good move. The New York Post reported on this, and several other media outlets had reported on this as well. And so Peter Rice has been ousted as Disney's, the person who was in charge of the TV and entertainment in Disney. I largely was going to be predicted to be Bob Chapek's successor, but he's not. Now, the Lightyear movie is coming out on June 17th. It's looking like the same-sex kiss scene will still be in there. Now, the question is, how severe or how intense is that kiss going to be? And there's no way of really knowing that until the movie comes out. It's going to be interesting to see, though, since Peter Rice had been ousted, if parents are going to boycott the movie or if they're going to let their kids see it. It's also going to be interesting to see how well this film does in the box office. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how well this film does in the box office. Anyways, hope everybody is doing well. We'll go about 20 minutes on this live stream, been about 20 minutes. So hope everybody is doing well. Take care. God bless, and bye-bye. Bye-bye.